I ended up in police paddy wagon, face down in darkness, threatening to be taken to the woods, to be killed. It is Europe. It's a 2-hour flight from London. And it's completely different reality.
Добрый вечер. Очень рад вас всех видеть, потому что у нас, к сожалению, невозможно сходить в театр и посмотреть спектакль.
My name is Natalia and Kaliada. I'm co-artistic director of Belarus Free Theatre. I'm living in exile for almost 11 years.
Спектакль, который сделан на основе большого количества интервью, нет ни одного слова неправды. Спасибо за то, что вы остаетесь с нами.
Я могу приказать, и здесь с тобой сделать все, что угодно.
In 2005, we announced that Belarus Free Theatre starts its existence. It was organized readings of contemporary plays, stage performances, international competition of contemporary drama, because we think that playwrights are the best X-ray machines of society.
Этот спектакль о трех девушках, которых все вы тоже про них прекрасно знаете, но драмы, которые они проживали, были не очень адекватны вот этой самой известности. Спасибо, что вы пришли, и хорошего вам просмотра.
We merged art and activism together, and we take taboo subject, put it into the frame of contemporary art, and take it to the streets to have direct access to people, to our audience.
Back then we used to do it in the forest at night. We'd drive the car up and park it about 10 meters from the hall, and then we'd bring them out, get them on their knees and in the back of the head.
Currently, it is a garage for 2 cars where we're able to accommodate 50-60 people, and another location is a former Soviet Union warehouse where we could accommodate around 200 people.
Здрасте, вы к нам? Подождем еще кого-нибудь, хорошо?
We will recommend you to come with your passport in case there is an arrest, so it will take less time, hopefully. And then you come to a meeting point, and from a meeting point, by small, tiny groups, you are taken to a place where we perform.
Да, вам сюда, мы подождем буквально 2 минуты и двинемся, все в порядке.
So everything is very organized. A car might wait for you in case if police is arriving, and driver has to be in a car in order to take you out of the place. You need to keep in mind so many details that we don't need to keep in mind in London or New York. Nobody plans to get arrested here. You just go and see the show.
Они выстрелили мне в затылок из пистолета.
Police came to our show to make pressure on the audience. Some of them tell us that after our performances, they have a warning that next time, if you go to BFT, we will fight you.
Every single day, we think they will be arrested. We think that something awful will happen.
Every sound out of the door, I was so scared. It's like I always thinking about something can happen with me, but I hope that it will not.
Я сняла трубку, меня спросили, у вас пропал муж? Я была поражена их осведомленностью.
In Belarus, we have 28 state-owned theaters and 32 jails. So just to understand that how much the government is paying attention to imprisoning people, and they actually don't pay attention to the arts at all. And that art that exists, they control. We're used to raids of police. In the case of state-run theaters, it's simply censored.
The Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. So in the early 90s, you had a semi-democratic transitional regime in Belarus. Then there was a presidential election in 1994, which Lukashenko ironically won as a kind of populist opposition figure in a more or less free and fair election. But within 2 years, he'd dismantled that quasi-democracy, basically in a constitutional coup d'etat. He imposed his own system, his own rules, and began imprisoning or exiling his opponents. Belarus still holds elections, but every one since 1994 has been rigged.
Если победят альтернативные кандидаты, любой из них,
Конечно, я это признаю, но если они победят.
Lukashenko's been president for 27 years now. So it's a very, very personalised dictatorship where he calls all the shots.
I was arrested last time in December of 2010 when it was so-called presidential elections because they are falsified every single time. The whole gathering, like peaceful demonstration of people who came to protect their rights for free and fair elections, within 7 minutes the crackdown started and 2,000 people got arrested. I ended up in police paddy wagon that was specifically built up for that day. They could accommodate like 70 people in it. I ended up face down in darkness in that van, and then they've been driving us for 4 hours, threatening to be raped, taken to the woods, to be killed. And sometimes in those conditions you feel like probably it's better already to happen than to continue to be in that strange feeling of unknown. I was in jail for 24 hours. You have to be stretched with your hands like that, and if you move, they will beat you up. Riot police shouted at me and said, shut up, otherwise we will rape you with legs of that chair.
Belarus Free Theatre have been in exile in London for a few years now. So they were in exile even before the current wave of exile began. Lukashenko doesn't like that combination of artistic creativity and political criticism. He doesn't have a cultural agenda, he's not a cultured guy. There isn't much of a plausible state ideology or even propaganda network. So actually the regime is quite vulnerable to its lack of culture, its lack of cultural politics, its lack of an ideology.
We got smuggled out on the 31st of December 2010. We became officially public enemies. We've been shown on TV. It was everywhere. We started to get phone calls from our friends saying don't come back, because during court hearings against our friends who've been arrested, they also show Nikolai and me as the main organizers of mass protests. So it's 11 years as we didn't come back.
Although they're in exile, they can operate in creative ways inside the country, particularly the kind of courtyard theatre that they were running through the protest period.
We spoke with our actors. They said, listen, you just direct with us online, and that was it. Directing shows online, it's a completely different experience. If we talk from perspective of rehearsals, it's necessary to ask our stage manager to take that computer around the room in order to see different angles.
Belarus under Lukashenko has elections, but they've always been highly stage managed. The regime determines who's allowed to stand. The regime writes the eventual result. In fact, there are considerable doubt as to whether the votes are actually counted. The 2020 election turned out to be surprisingly competitive. He excluded what he saw as his most serious contenders, but he allowed the wife of one of them to stand in his place, making all sorts of sexist comments about how she wouldn't cope with his job because it was such a tough job.
Избавилась от сильных конкурентов. Не учли они, что у каждого сильного мужчины за плечами стоит сильная женщина.
But that dismissive attitude turned out to be a big mistake. She ran a powerful campaign. We don't know what the real result was.
Ну, конечно, мы с ними не согласны, потому что у нас есть совершенно противоположные данные.
And people knew that. It was obvious this was rigging. So you had mass protests. And you had 3 days of initial regime violence, which he assumed would force people back into their homes, clear the streets. But this time, people proved really persistent, and they carried on protesting for 3 months until it got too cold, really, to carry on in mid-November. You had 30,000 arrests. So this is basically the most serious human rights abuse in Europe since the end of the Cold War. President Lukashenko is heard ordering his security services to target opposition activists abroad using every means necessary, threatening, in fact, their murder.
Living in the UK, you don't think that something might happen here, but you never know. So our relatives get phone calls back in Minsk from secret police who will say, like, pass to your children that they need to watch their backs. And we know where they are, we know what they are, and we know where they are. We convince ourselves that it's just psychological pressure. But again, knowing that in the UK they were mothers of Russian dissidents, you never could rule out. We do not plan to stop, otherwise it will mean that dictators could think they're stronger, but they are not. They don't have any creativity, they don't have any morality, and we think that morality and creativity, it puts them into panic mode. When put them into panic mode, it means we did our job.